Okay, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about Manoonmin, or wild rice. My name is Traci Cabral, and I'm with Kiiwetinokolkamekaanak Board of Education, and I'm the Student Support Services. So I'm from Shoal Lake 39, and that's right near the Ontario-Manitoba border. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about wild rice today. First of all, wild rice is very nutritious for you. It is considered a whole grain, and it's actually a grass. It's not even really a grain, but for all intents and purposes, you know, it's kind of seen like a grain, and it's pretty much nutritional-wise equal to or better than brown rice. Wild rice does not elevate your sugar levels fast, so it's very good for diabetics. It's high in fiber. Now, wild rice is found along shallow waterways and where there's not much current, so it has a muddy bottom, and that's so the roots can take place. And when they're going in their canoes, getting the wild rice, they usually have a long paddle. And at the bottom of the paddle, it's to be no longer than 12 inches, because what they're doing is they're taking this long pole and they're pushing off the bottom of the ground to propel. And when they're pushing off the bottom, they're trying not to disturb the roots, because if they disturb the roots, they'll kill the plant. So when you're watching videos of people harvesting wild rice, that's why they have the long poles, kind of like a gondola pushing from the bottom, okay? They have the thrashing sticks that they knock the rice into the canoe with, and those don't weigh more than a pound, just because after a while of a day in the rice fields, if it's more than a pound, it's going to be very tiring, very taxing. Picking the rice by hand is better than by using the big airboats, because you're apt to miss a few pieces of rice and it falls into the water, and that helps the cycle of life for next year's plants as well. As well as with thrashing, you're not breaking the stems, whereas I think with a lot of the airboats, when they're coming in, it snaps some of the plants, so we have to be very careful with that. Wild rice can be cooked many ways. It can be done in stir fries, it can be added to soups, it can be mixed with oats, with meat, different wild meats. You can do it in puddings, you can do it in squares, all different types of wild rice recipes that you can make. It has a nutty flavor, and the texture of it is almost have a chewier texture than regular rice. So it makes really good stuffing into a duck or a goose or a turkey. We usually have that every Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving or Christmas. My mom usually does a wild rice stuffing. She adds bacon to it, onions, some seasoning, salt and pepper. Sometimes you can add cranberries to it, or even if you want walnuts to change it up. And then you just make sure your bird's all dry inside and cleaned out, and you pack it in, and then you cook it with like with regular cooking instructions for your bird or a duck or whatever, and it's really good. So that's one of our main dishes at Thanksgiving or Christmas for us. The other thing that we used to have is the popped wild rice as a treat, and we still have that treat now. And we just pop the wild rice in hot oil, and then we take it out to the frying pan, take tin foil just to take off the excess oil, put it into our bowl, and I like mine with a little bit of melted butter and some sugar and a little bit of cinnamon. And cinnamon's also very good for you. That brings down your sugar levels as well. So, you know, it's not the most nutritional dish because it's deep fried, but it's very good as a dessert. The other thing I've heard with wild rice, I've never had this myself, but I heard that you can grind it. You can grind the rice into a powder and make a flour. So if you have someone who can't have regular flour, it's an alternative, and you can make a wild rice flour. And I've heard of that being done, and I've heard of people actually coating their fish with this flour, and it's supposed to be really good. I have yet to try that. But yeah, so all different types of applications for wild rice, and yeah, it's in our backyard basically, where I'm from anyways. When preparing wild rice, like once it's brought in from the lake, they'd bring it in their canoes and tip the canoes over and put the rice onto tarps. And they would spread out the rice to dry in the sun and get most of the moisture out. And then they would take this rice and they'd put it into big frying pans, or big tubs, I guess. Not a frying pan, a tub. And they would have, again, a long paddle, and they would go like this and flip it and keep tossing it so it wouldn't burn. And that would take out the excessive moisture, and they were actually roasting it. So after all of it was done and it was dry enough, they would take it out and they would dance on it. So in a hole in the ground, there's a hole dug into the ground, and it was lined, so the rice would be there. They put the rice in, and then you'd have your moccasins on, and there'd be a pole in front of you with 2 support ends so that you could hang on to this and rest against it, because it was quite hard work to try. And you have your moccasins on, and then you start kind of dancing on the rice, and you're bringing your outside of your foot in. So you're not breaking the rice down. Like if you were to stomp on it, you'd just be snapping the rice. But by rolling it and going along the sides of the hole, you were helping loosen the shafts off the rice. So once you were done with this, you would take that batch of rice and you'd either put it onto a blanket or onto a birch bark container, and you'd take it and you'd lift it and throw it in the wind, and the wind would blow away the shafts, and then you'd shake it again and flip it up. And you could do it on the blanket as well. You know, you could each take a corner and have a bunch of rice on there, and then you'd lift it up, and then the wind would take away the husks. And then eventually all your dark rice would just be sitting on the blanket, and then you could store it, and that'll store all winter. It won't go moldy, and yeah, you can keep it all till next year.